and
What do you do?
And the life you plan to shatter.
What do you say?
When the one you love is gone.
How do you live?
Seems like no hope for tomorrow.
He doesn't care
where you live or who you are.
You see, my life is
broken. I don't know what to do. When I can't see, I know. Whoa, and I cry out. Now I'm praying. I know you hear. I'm praying for healing. Who do you call
when no one has the answer?
Where do you go?
The place you've known is no more.
When will they stop?
All the tears, they just keep falling.
Pain doesn't care.
Pain doesn't care where you live or who you are.
and I don't know what to do.
Don't know what to do.
Help me remain. I will
Count on yourself.
when I can't see. When I cry out. I know you feel. Now I'm praying. Yes. Praying for healing. Yes. We ask you to forgive.
You're the same, Lord, as we receive your love.
And we take this time to hold on and wait.
Just a little while. Over in the midnight. Yeah. Come on. Just a little while, say, bring the song of strength. Oh, everybody put your hand together and say it. Hold on, say it, hold on, say it. Just a little while, say it. Oh, New York City, did you hear me? Cause we've been made and done for the night. But joy, comes in the morning light. Say yeah, yeah, yeah. Somebody say it one time. Say yeah. With your love, yeah. Yes, sir. Yes. Come on, somebody say it again. Say it.
greetings, 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 greetings. I'm King Clifford Jefferson, a Senator Godfrey, the fifth Caravan Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I'm the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, which we know here as the King of Peace, or the Vicar of Peace, or Melchizedek, the King of Righteousness. It is September 15th, 2025, which is equivalent to the birth year 2975. I greet you in the name of my Queen Galveston from the House of Galveston. I greet you in the name of Archbishop Belmont from the House of Belmont. I greet you in the name of all the heirs, successors, all those who are striving to the understanding of what it is that we are all called to do. Once again, this lesson is called No More Separation of Powers, No More Republic, says the 14th Amendment. No more separation of powers, no more republic, says the 14th Amendment. I don't know if you are aware of that, but the separation of powers and republic form of government, which you know it as under the 7 Articles, 10 Bill of Rights, and the 3 Reconstruction Amendments, is over. Okay? It is over. All right? I was going to title this lesson as part 2 between the conversation between the devil and Abraham Africanus Lincoln. Nonetheless, I'm going to read from that pamphlet again today, but I think the more befitting title will be No More Separation of Powers and No More Republic, says the 14th Amendment, which was the devil's plan. We know the devil is the agent of God. We understand that his job was to make sure he carry out his job, and as the undertaking of God's possession here on earth, and his obligation is to harm those or subdue those who are in opposition to the law. Okay, we got those who claim to follow the law, and those who don't follow the law, and we need to make that distinction. With that, let's get started with this marvelous lesson. Give me 1 second. All right, I'm not going to hold you up. I'm going to get right into it. We're going to talk about a lot what we talked about yesterday with some new additions to that. All right, in regards to no more separation of powers and no more republic. I'm not saying that it's the 14th Amendment and the instructions as laid down are the 14th Amendment, because when you amend the Constitution, anything that was made prior to that amendment is invalid. Okay, so just get uh, 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 what we call some type of attestment to that fact. We're going to use AI because we know AI is ancestral intelligence. So let's see what AI has to say about the amendment, or any amendment for that matter. Hold that thought. How about that? A lot of you look down on the 14th Amendment because you think it's a dead badge of law, that it made us second-class citizens, and you have no idea. Okay, you have no idea. I'm going to start off with the conversation again between Abraham Lincoln. As we know, he passed the Emancipation Proclamation that emancipated us, but it did not make us one of the people or we the people, okay, as prescribed by the preamble of the United States Constitution. If you're going to actually go through that Constitution, realize that that was the frame of government, i.e., the Constitution, that superseded the Articles of Confederation of Perpetual Union. Okay, so it's very important that you pay close attention to your teacher. Okay, pay very close attention to your teacher. All right, let's get started. We're going back to the conversation between Abraham Lincoln and Baal or Beelzebub or Satan, whoever you want to call him. Okay, about a contractual agreement between Satan and Abraham Lincoln. Okay, not saying that Abraham Lincoln was an agent of Satan. No, Abraham Lincoln was being used by Satan, okay, to bring about a better cause for those who were running God's kingdom in the absence of God, in the absence of that entity who's supposed to be God on earth, i.e., King Edward the Peaceful, i.e., Jesus Christ, which I'm the reincarnation of, because prior to me coming on the scene, this revelation was not known. Okay, so with that, let's get started with this marvelous lecture. One thing we need to understand about this book, the title. Okay, the title. You know a lot about its title. Abram. Okay, Abraham, Abram. Africa, what was it called? So Abraham Africanus, his secret life as revealed under the mesmeric influence. Okay, mysteries of the White House. What does the word mesmeric mean, and what does the word influence mean? We already know what the word influence means, because influence means to be uh, um, uh, not forced to do something, but based upon the suggestion brings forth what we call the influence. Okay, based upon mesmeric. Mesmeric means or has to deal with what we call hypnosis. Okay, hypnosis concerning the mysteries of the White House. Okay, so the mesmeric influence, meaning the influences that came or influenced Abraham Lincoln as a result of what we call being under what we call hypnosis. Okay, so when we read this article, it's not based upon Abraham Lincoln being in what we call the right state of mind, but being in the state of mind, a conscious state of mind, being influenced by his thoughts. Okay, so the suggestions of his thoughts, like all of us are. We are influenced by our thoughts. Okay, the thoughts are what we call a frequency, and that is what we call the light. Majority of the people who are in Congress, all right, which is the legislative department, all right, or what we call the parliamentary system versus the legislative system or congressional system, all right. Most of these people, all right, are supposed to be representing the light. The light represents the law. Okay, that's what they're supposed to represent. How we know that? Because the law is the intent of the legislation. The law is the intent of the legislation. So either it's the God making law or the devil's making the law. Okay? And we're talking about one branch exclusively, the legislative branch, because the legislative branch is the legs that the government stands on. Okay? It's the legs that the government is standing on. So Abraham Lincoln, or Africanus, which is a Latin word for the word African, okay, which Abraham and the term African is a misnomer, as well as black is a misnomer, based upon how we should properly identify ourselves according to the mesmeric influence that Abraham Lincoln undertook, okay, concerning his position as the president of the White House. Okay, let's get started. I need to get this PDF. I'm not going to read the poem. All right, the poem is simply about Abraham's falling off to sleep or dozing off to sleep, and in the transition of him dozing off to sleep, he encounters a vision or a view which seems to be some like resemblance of what we call Satan. Okay, and as Abraham realizes it, a conversation starts to brew. Okay, between Satan and Abraham. Okay, or Abram. All right, so we're just going to revisit that real quickly to get our basis. Okay, because the conversation involving Satan and the devil, I'm parts of involving Abraham and the devil, especially the topic of the conversation, affects us today, and that is regards to the Emancipation Proclamation. So the Emancipation Proclamation was an agreement between Satan and the devil, okay, about the emancipation of who? Those who were freed from by the 13th Amendment, okay, because that was the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th Amendment, okay. So let's look at it in its entirety. Try to read it with some type of clarity. Okay. Start right there. Page 8. All right, so this is a conversation between Abraham Lincoln and Satan. It says, well, the fact is, said Abraham, handing old Nick a chair and pushing the decanter towards him, it comes more natural. Okay. I could defend myself a good deal easier. Your words to the contrary notwithstanding. This reminds me of the Western story. The Western story. This means the Northwest Territory and the Southwest Territory, which is the property that was succeeded to the founding fathers as a result of the Treaty of Paris of 1783, ratified 1784. But it says, "Ah," says Satan, pouring himself out a pretty stiff horn and gazing at the fire through its amber transparency with the air of the connoisseur, a joke. Yes, what should I call it? A damn good joke, for it serves my purpose elegantly. Don't swear, interrupted Nick, or St. Nick, the one you call Santa Claus. Forget your old habits for once and behave yourself while in the presence of a gentleman as a gentleman. 'Twas a big thing on Douglas, though, I assure you, continued Abe, talking about his opposition and the towards presidency. Douglas, said the devil reflectively. I don't know him. What? You don't know Little Giant of the West? I thought he had gone to you gone to you long ago. Mistake, my dear boy. He must have gone the other way, for I have not seen him in our direction. Well, said Abraham, no matter. Here's the story. During the electioneering campaign I had with Douglas in Illinois, we agreed to debate our differences in public. On the occasion of the first debate, which took place at Ottawa, The judge asked me a number of questions which he had written down on a piece of paper. Among them were the following. There were 4 questions that were asked to Abe. Okay. Question number 2. I desire Lincoln to answer whether he stands pledged today, as he did in 1854, against the admission of any more slave states in the Union, even if the people want them. Okay, when they talk about we the people. Question number 3. I want to know whether Lincoln stands pledged against the admission of a new state into the Union with such a constitution as the people of that state may see fit to make. We're talking about the Constitution of the United States. Question number 4. I want to know whether he stands today pledged to the abolition of slavery and the District of Columbia. Pretty good for the judge, cried Satan, polishing off the ends of his tail with his pocket handkerchief. I don't see how you managed to get around it. Satan talking to Abraham. Easy enough, my boy, said Abraham, tipping his friend to wink. I didn't answer them all. Then he defeated you in the debate. No, not at all. I promised to answer them at the next debate at Freeport. Ha ha ha, very good, cried Satan. Promises are easy means to appease. You promised to the end in the war in 90 days, for instance. The walls of my abode are covered with them, that being promised to. But how did you manage the judge at Freeport? You should hear, said Abe exultantly. When I appeared on the stand, I had my answer already in writing. They were as follows. Answer number 2. There's not an answer number 1. Only you see answer number 2, answer number 3, and answer number 4. So I yet to know what answer number 1 is. Answer number 2. He said, I do not nor ever did stand pledged against the admission of any more slave states into the Union. Answer number 3. I do not stand pledged against the admission of a new state into the Union, with such constitution as the people of the state may see fit to make. And answer number 4. I do not stand today pledged to the abolition of slavery and the District of Columbia. Brown was silent. The devil twitched nervously on his chair, turning over the blade of his tail with a troubled air, as though by so doing he hoped to find the point. I confess, said Nick, that being the devil, I don't see the point. Plain enough, said Braun, putting his arm around his friend's neck and speaking in a tone exaltation. I said, my friends, the judge should be answered strictly and in accordance with the interrogatories he had put to me. I don't need stand plans to anything. Bully for you, cried Satan in rapture. You are the smartest people I ever had. I am afraid people will find you out after a while, though. Devil Phil, boy. As long as I am called Honest Abe, the people will swallow anything. There's nothing like having an honest name, and this is a cloak for everything. True, said Beelzebub. He forbore to say anything more. His mind was filled with uneasy suspiciousness. What if the cute Bram should slip out of his bargaining with him? True, he continued rolling the idea over in his mind. If I hadn't tackled this name to you, you wouldn't have been nowhere today. It gave you confidence and you profited well by it. But how about our arrangement? You don't expect to argue me out of that, do you? Come, brother, said Bram, with an affected air and honest indignation. You don't suspect my intentions, do you? Hell is paid with them, said the father of lies, sententiously. I want something more palatable than your assurance, Abe. Suppose we draw up a little memorandum of our agreement. So saying, he whipped out a small little scroll of parchment and tapped a hole in Bram's arm before he was sufficiently aware of his intention to prevent it. Use his blood for the ink. Then, scribing feverishly for a few minutes, he covered the scroll with fine writing and read the contract to his confederate. I hereby pledge to elevate Abraham Lincoln to life presidency of the United States of America. Stop, cried Brown. You promised a monarchy, or at least a first consulship. Fool, said the devil, don't you perceive that if you call yourself a king or first consul, the whole people will rise up upon you? Let them rise, said Brahm. I have my army. Every officer had been selected and appointed with that view. They are all men who believe that government needs to be strengthened. Your army wouldn't be worth a straw if you proceed to rule so rudely. There are Democrats enough in the country to eat up your army, but they're not organized. Ernst Brahm. Sorry about that. They said your army wouldn't be worth a straw if you proceed so rudely. They are Democrats enough in the country to eat up your army, but they are not organized, urged Brahm. And what more, I don't intend to let them organize. Very strongly put, brother, but still, there's nothing like doing things smoothly. My word for it is the easiest way is the best. You owe all your present success to four things. That was Satan speaking to Abraham. First, my nomination. Second, your subvergent of honest. Third, those weak points of the Constitution, which a little management converted into flaws, and a little stretching wideness into fixtures wide enough to drive a train car through. Military necessity did the rest. Fourth, doing things quietly. All these things combined had given you what I promised you in our first contract, power. In return, you brought on a war which had made taking both belligerent together something like 1 million of victims. They're talking about all the wars between both belligerents, the adversary, the opposing parties. Okay? The devil was undermining all that had been undermined from the past to the present as well as the future. Okay? So they're talking about, in return, you brought on a war which had made taking both belligerents together something like 1 million of victims. And out of that million, chuckled Abraham, of course, you reap a plentiful harvest. Not so, Ram. I never was more deceived in my life. I got my share, but the majority of them were poor ignorant fools infused with a false patriotism. I did well with the abolitionists and the men who accepted bounties, but the formers were very scarce, and the latter are hardly worth picking up anyway. But to our contract, if you are elected for another term, you can easily get a law passed declaring the country in a state of permanent insurrection and demanding more power to put it down. The first thing will be a law to make the presidency perpetual while the war lasts. So the reason why they had a presidency is a result of the wars that they had. Okay? Very important we understand that. The first thing, because Abraham Lincoln wanted a monarchy as promised or a first consulship. But the devil told him, no, you can't do that because you're in a state of war. All right? You inherited what was already in place before your inheritance in regards to what our contract talked about. Okay? The first thing will be the law to make the presidency perpetual while the war lasts. The next, another making, is perpetual during your life. Thus, you will have gotten over the hardest part of it. The rest is easy enough. You can then have it entailed, all right? He said, now you can then have it entailed on your posterity and change the title whenever you please. I should advise you to stick to that of the presidency, though. Okay? So the purpose of the 14th Amendment and its sections, as established by the 14th Amendment and its sections, was to restore the fusion of government that was undermined by a separation of powers under Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3. We're going to talk about it in a second. So they went on with the original contract, all right, that was between Abraham and the devil, or Satan, or Beelzebub. I hereby pledge to elevate Abraham Lincoln to life presidency of the United States of America. And I'm pretty sure this same contract that was made with Abraham Lincoln was made with all the rest of the presidents, all right? And to stand by him and assist him to subvert the liberties of the American people. You hear that? To subvert the liberties of the American people and to launch their civic aspirations. What is this I'm reading? The devil persuaded Abraham Lincoln to debauch the civil liberties of the assumed we the people called the American people, okay? That's what we're reading here, all right? To debauch their civic aspirations, their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. To impose upon them in every imaginable form of low cunning and cheat them with words of double meaning and with false promises, until by these and kindred means that the end is accomplished and his dynasty firmly established. You hear that? Go home to your father. While Satan was writing the contract, Brom held his arm very patiently by way of an inkstand. By now he withdrew it hastily and looking at his watch, exclaimed, listen, y'all, I read this yesterday, but it's going to mean totally different how I read today. He looked at his watch and exclaimed, all right, my boy, I'll sign that, and then you please to consider this interview over, at an end, to finito, for some of my men on my council, or my generals, have been advancing too quickly, and if I don't relieve them of their commands, the war be over in a jiffy, and goodbye to my plan. So the plan was to continue the war for Satan, okay? What war? The war against the emancipation of the free slaves, not African, not white, but those identified as black people. I'm going to prove it. He said, you forget, said Beelzebub meaningly, and fixed his burning eyes upon Brahms till the latter whined and wiggled as though he was on a toasted fork. You forget, my dear Brahms. What? Stammered Brahms, fearing he had detected you hoping to yet hoping to escape. What did I forget? What roared the evil one? Do you pretend you don't know, you low cunning, pettifogging, cringling, Norfolk, Illinois stump lawyer? But you cheat me. You know very well there is no consideration expressed in that deed, or you wouldn't have been in such a hurry to sign it and want to look after your major generals. But come, let us remain friends. I admire you the more for your dishonesty. Only you mustn't think to beat the devil round the stump. I'm among thieves, you know. Y'all hear this conversation? So saying the worthy pair shook hands and smiled. The elder one then proceeded to finish an agreement. Its consideration whereby my friend promises no pledges. Pledges to render unto me what he possesses. It ain't much anyhow, of a moral soul, the same to be mine forever. Signed Bow and signed Braun. Now, said Bow, listen, brothers and sisters, as old Abe with trembling fingers and face white as a sheet, signed the bond. Now, my dear Abe, if you want any advice, just let me know, for likewise, I have other matters to attend to. Right? So the devil got to go. Go be in the hurry, said Abe. Wow. Looking with the regret upon the parchment with vow, has suffered to remain on the table. What shall I do with the abolitionist party? Nothing. I do seems to please them. Plus, Philip is constantly abusing me. This is Abraham's argument. Mabal told him, don't even worry about it. I got this under control. Let's see. He told Abraham, issue a proclamation of emancipation. All right? You remember you said in Chicago, July 5th, 1858, I hate and have always hated slavery as much as any other abolitionists. It will run well with your words. You got a good memory, Nick. But your advice is already he said, but your advice is rather too late. I've issued such a proclamation already. So the devil told Abe to issue a proclamation of emancipation, but Abraham went further. He already did it. The dudes you have who put you up to that, Abby. So now the devil's question, Abe, you had a deuce in your pocket. Who put you up to pass that Emancipation Proclamation? All right? He said it was original, old fellow. Original. Every line of it. Come, friend, said old Nick repeatedly, reproachably. You know you haven't brains enough to stretch a clothesline. Somebody must have put you up to it, or you never could have done it. Who was it? Sumner? No. Hale? No. Wilson? Well, Wilson gave me a hint or two. Exactly. And upon that hint, you spoke. Wasn't it a bad idea, wasn't it? No. Still you may lose the support of the conservatives. Okay? We're still talking about the body of politics that we're still under, brothers and sisters. The same body of politics that we're still under. I provided against that. I issued secret instructions to banks and others to pay no attention to the proclamation of emancipation and to order the Negroes, the blacks, the Africans, whatever name you go by, in the respective department to remain on the plantation once we were emancipated by the Emancipation Proclamation, i.e. the 13th Amendment. All right? Well, what good would that do, said Abraham. Don't you see? Don't you see? Oh, I'm sorry. Don't you see? By compelling them to remain, they will be obliged to work. But that's slavery all over again. True, but it won't appear to be so. We say it's necessary to the public peace that the Negroes should not be roaming about the country. This is why we have the Fugitive Slave Acts, brothers and sisters. This is the reason why we have the Fugitive Slave Acts, all right? Going back to the Northwest Ordinances of 1784, okay? Under the Northwest Ordinances, all right? And which didn't come to fruition till 1787, okay? All dealing with the taking of our estate through the process of fee simple, okay? It says true, but it won't appear so. We say it's necessary to the public peace that the Negroes should not be roaming about the country. That keeps them at work, and while their labor benefits the men I have appointed, to cultivate the plantation, all of whom are creatures of mine. You hear that? That keeps them at work, and while their labor benefits the men I have appointed to cultivate the plantation, all of whom are creatures of mine. The measures will give assurance to the conservatives that I am not in a hurry to emancipate. So he had plans on emancipating the so-called free people who were emancipated by the 13th Amendment and became citizens by the 14th Amendment. But we're talking about those who were still subject to hell, a state of hell by the devil's advocates, the framers of the Constitution. All right? Not so bad. I traced Brother Stewart's mind in that arrangement. But to the abolitionists again, I don't exactly see what you could do for them. Although I understand the value of air support at the election, how would a draft for 500,000 more men do? You frightened. What, a 500,000 more? Yes, it will have threefold advantages. First, it will please the radicals. Two, draw away so many votes from the opposition. Three, convert enemies into friends. For once in the army, they had no chance for a democratic sentiment. Brom here slightly covered the scribbled parchment with his long bony hands, but the devil had been watching him and caught it up in time. Upon Brom appeared not to be aware of the maneuver, but continued to subject of the proposed drafts. I like your advisor and shall act upon it. But wouldn't such an act be treachery to the state that have filled up the last quota and treachery to those that were given to suppose there would be no other draft? Okay, so this goes back into the devil's last conversation with Abram. So this is all about the Emancipation Proclamation. We're not even talking about the 14th Amendment because has not been proposed nor ratified yet. Okay? So it says here, you see that all not what it appears, to smell, touch, taste, or eyes of ears. And many wondrous things may be, which baffles our philosophy. So mesmer magic sleeps defies, hands, nose, mouth, and ears and eyes. He sleeps and forthwith I'll commence to act upon his slumbering sense. And though each phrenologic bump act on the brains with moral pump. By touching each well, make appear the trait that hid beneath each hair. Of good or ill, we'll have it shown, and first we'll place our touch on tone. So hence proceeded where he said to place his hand upon Brahm's head, who answered to the magic touch, straightway broke out into this part show, who answered to the magic touch, straightway broke out into this snatch. Well hang Jeff Davis on a sore apple tree. Well hang Jeff Davis on a sore apple tree. Well hang Jeff Davis on a sore apple tree as we go marching along. Ho, ho, cries senseless stentor. Ho, that songs go hateful as they roars old. For the party purposes, it has, at the party purposes, it has its day. We pray thee, wondrous soul, to change the lay. Or carry me back, or carry me back to old Virginia shores. I'll change my ways and reappoint Mac and never do so no more. And shifting his position on the chair, great Abram cleared his throat and changed the air. Come back, well vote to Mac. Success where he goes, will drink today as well be made, confused to his foes. That didn't rhyme, but nonetheless. Let me just go a little further here. Pass it. Bear with me, y'all. Page right here. Great sires, I do seek to addle your brain with lone, unmeaning twaddle, nor by abstraction infinite your mind to puzzle or be knit, but by some strong, unchallenged facts, give truth and credence to my acts, so that the science in the man, my challenge doubt, if doubt you can. Till then, we all must silence keep, that while I charm great Brahm to sleep. Then seating Brahm upon the chair, the mighty Su began to stare. While watching both with anxious eyes, the other two stood wandering by. Thus long they stood till Su advancing, his eyes with magic meaning glancing. He stood beside, then wildly throwing his arms about, began powwowing. Till Brahm's great eyes were seen to wink, his head to nod, his forward sink. Then with a smile to those around, great Su announced to sleep profound, invite both to touch and sing, and then this effect begin. You see that all, not what appears, to smell, touch, taste, or eyes and ears, and many wondrous things may be which baffle our philosophy. So mesmer magic sleep defies, hands, nose, mouth, and ears and eyes. He sleeps and forward I'll commence to set upon his slumber scent. And though each phrenological bump acts on the brain with moral pumps, I actually just read this. I'll read it again. By touching each well may make a pair by touching each will make appear the trait that hides beneath of good or ill will have it shown, and first will place our touch in tone. So hence proceed where he said to place his hand on Brahm's head, who answered to the magic touch, straightway broke out into his snatch. I want to see when he left Brahm. Where's it at? Where is it at? So another 5 minutes on this, and I move forward. It's an important book. We all need to get this book. I'm telling you. Bear with me. Gotta find it. It won't be beneficial to you if I don't find it. It's not gotta move. And this is just from my growth. That's why I'm doing a lesson to educate me more I continue education. Where is this at? My mouse acting up. What? Bear with me. I'm going to sit down. I'll just move forward. Let's start here. United States Constitution. Where is that? Swinging acronym. Bear with me. Brain problems. Why? Brain difficulties you're going to bear with. Sharing issue. Still here. Sorry for the problem with the PDF. But, Let's get started. Constitution of the United States, Supreme Point Commission. All should know. Apparently, we don't know, so we have to be informed. Okay, very information, right? We have 7 articles, 10 Bill of Rights, and 3 Reconstruction clauses, amendments. Very important. Let's go through them to show you that there is no more separation of powers, no more republic, says the 14th Amendment. I'm not saying that. That's what the 14th Amendment said. But, the 14th Amendment was an amendment to the Constitution, right? The 14th Amendment was an amendment to the Constitution. We know when there's an amendment to the Constitution, it changes the legal framework, okay? It changes the legal framework. Let's see how. Does an amendment to the Constitution change the legislative act before the amendment? Let's see. Yes, a constitutional amendment changes or replaces the existing legal framework. Once again, yes, a constitutional amendment changes or replaces the existing legal framework, meaning that any legislative act passed before the amendment that contradicts the new text of the amendment supersedes and no longer is considered valid. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? It's a supersedes and no longer valid as the amendment takes precedence. And in essence, the amendment becomes the higher law of the land, overriding conflicting prior legislation. Did y'all hear that? Did you hear that? So once again, in lieu of the 14th Amendment, which is the part of the amendments that denotes to do what we call the Reconstruction Amendments, okay? You got the Bill of Rights, you got the 7 articles, Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 deals with the separation of powers of the legislative, executive, judicial branch. Article 4 deals with republic form of government and other matters. Article 5 deals with the amendments. Article 6 deals with the power that the federal government has over the states. And Article 7 deals with the ratification, okay, by 2/3 majority. So yes, a constitutional amendment changes or replaces the existing legal framework, meaning that the legislative act passed before the amendment, which are in contradiction to the amendment, becomes null and void. Meaning that legislative act passed before the amendment that contradicts the new text of the amendment is superseded and no longer valid. And in essence, the amendment becomes the higher law of and overrides the conflicted prior legislation. Okay? Very important for us to understand that. All right? Now let's look at this. I asked AI. I asked if the 14th Amendment can continue the separation of powers. Okay? That's what I typed in. This is what AI had to say in AI's overview. The 14th Amendment did not continue the separation of powers, but rather altered the balance of power between the federal and state government. It drastically expanded federal power, particularly that of the federal judiciary and Congress, at the expense of the state's authority. Did you hear that? So there was no more separation of powers as a result of the 14th Amendment and its sections, okay? Because there was in the 14th Amendment and sections where exemplify the original articles, Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3, but they do not, okay? We're going to examine that even further, all right? Let's go to it. We might have a problem with this. The Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the United States and superseded the Articles of Confederation, the nation's first constitution, on March 4th, 1789. Originally including the 7 articles in the Constitution defines the foundation structure of the federal government. The new government, prior to the Constitution of the United States, it was under the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation of Perpetual Union was subject to what we call the Treaty of Paris ratification, January 14, 1784. If it wasn't for that Treaty of Paris, then you wouldn't have the Articles of Confederation of Perpetual Union. If it was for that, you wouldn't have the Constitution of the United States. Okay, and it wasn't to the Constitution of the United States that you incorporated the what we call separation of powers, Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3. Okay, let's look at that. We just be right over this information. The drafting of the Constitution by many of the nation's founding fathers, often referred to as its framing, was completed at the Constitutional Convention, which was assembled at the Independence Hall in Philadelphia between May 25th and September 1787. Influenced by the English common law, though, the Enlightenment liberalism of philosophers like John Locke and Montesquieu, the Constitution's first 3 articles embody a doctrine of a separation of powers in which the federal government is divided into what? Is divided into the legislative bicameral Congress. Okay? The legislative is separated into a bicameral Congress, means 2 divisions, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Under the common law, we call the House of Lords and the House of Commons. Very important we understand that. Nonetheless, it makes up what we call the legislative branch. Okay? It makes up the legislative branch. You call it Congress. We call it Parliament. Then you have the executive branch led by what we call the presidents, okay? And then you have the judiciary, which is what we call the apex governing the jurisdiction, because it decides if those in the latter, based upon the legislative in the executive department, violate the legislation, okay? Very important. You have Article 4, Article 5, and Article 6, embodying the concept of what we call federalism. Okay? We understand that federalism is guaranteed a Republican form of government. Okay? Article 4. All right, let's look at that real quick. Basic understanding. Article 4 of the United States Constitution outlines the relationship between the various states, as well as the relationship between each state and the United States federal government. It also empowers Congress to admit new states and administers the territory of other federal government of the federal land. That denotes to Article 4, Article 5, and Article 6. Parts of Article 5, Article 6, and Article 7, because to admit new states, it takes amendment and ratification. Okay? Very important. So it also empowers Congress to admit new states and administer territory and other federal government. That's Article 4. What does Article 4 also? What does it also does? Section 1 of Article 4 deals with privileges and immunities. Okay. Clause 2 deals with extradition of fugitives. That goes back to the Fugitive Slave Act we talked about. Okay. Clause 3, Fugitive Slave Clause. Okay. Fugitive Slave Clause. Very important. Section 3, admission of new states. You can't do that without Article 5, 6, and 7. There's only 7 articles. So in order for you to admit new states, you need Article 5, 6, and 7. Okay? Very important. And then you have Section 4. Got clause 2, property clause. What else? Then you got section 4, obligation of the United States. Okay. Clause 1, a republican form of government. A republic form of government is a government of we the people. At this time, we the people is called the founding fathers. Okay. That's called the founding fathers. So we just dealt with Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, which deals with the separation of powers. Article 4 deals with the relationship that the federal government has with the state in regards to each state having what? A republican form of government and the authority to amend the constitution of the state by way of amendment and ratification by 2/3. Very important that we understand that. So with that, we have Article 5. What is Article 5? Let's talk about that. This is how you teach. Article 5 of the United States describes the procedure for altering the Constitution, which includes Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, and Article 4. Article 5 deals with altering it by what we call amendment. And that only can come by way of Article 7, which means to ratify. And then Article 6 deals with the amendment and ratifying on the federal level, which affects it on the state level. Okay? And must be done by what? 2/3 vote. Very important to understand that. That's Article 5. Let's go to Article 6 now. Article 6. Yeah, Article 6. Let's see Article 6. Article 6 of the United States Constitution establishes that laws and treaties of the United States made in accordance with it as the supreme law of land and forbids a religious text as a requirement for holding a governmental position under the supreme law of the land in lieu of what we call treaties, laws made by the United States, and holds the United States under the Constitution responsible for debt occurred by the United States under the Articles of Confederation. So nothing has changed, just the name. The Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union still are under the same obligation as under the United States Constitution, which replaced the Articles of Confederation, which is based upon a perpetual union, which is rooted in the Treaty of Paris of 1783 and 1784. We must understand how important it is to understand the Constitution. All right? This same language we see in Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, Article 4, Article 5, Article 6, and Article 7, we're going to see the same language in the 14th Amendment and its sections. Okay? The same exact language, but the language now does not show a separation of power, nor does it show a republic form of government. And we just read, when there's an amendment to the Constitution, it changes the legal framework, and the legal framework is the Constitution, because anything contrary to the Constitution and its amendments is notwithstanding. Okay? It is notwithstanding. We must understand how important this lesson is. Okay, so Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 separates the power, right? Very important. The executive, legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. Article 4 deals with, as they stated, deals with the state relationships, as well as what it said, between each state and the federal government, the power of the state to amend new states by amendment and ratification. Article 5 deals with altering the Constitution as well, and no religious test is required in regards to an office. All right, is that what it said? No, Article 5 was for altering the Constitution by amendments. Okay. Then you got Article 6. All right. Article 6 deals with religious tests, no religious test for holding an office. Very important. And then we got Article 7. Okay. Then we have Article 7. Very important. So Article 4, Article 5, Article 6 embodies the concept of federalism, describing the rights and responsibilities of state governments, the states in relationship to the federal government, and then the process of constitutional amendments. Article 7 established the procedure used to what? Ratify the Constitution. Only way you can ratify it is by amending it, and that comes by 2/3 of both houses, okay, of the House, okay? Very important. Since the Constitution became operational in 1789, it has been amended 27 times, okay? We're only concerned about the 13 amendments. The first 10 amendments, which was called what? The 10 Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments, known collectively as the Bill of Rights, offer specific protection of individual liberties and justice and place restrictions on the powers of government within the United States. Very, 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 very important. The restrictions under the Bill of Rights is the restrictions that were put on the representatives, i.e. the trustees, reference to the form of government they had prior to the creation of what we call the Bill of Rights, okay? The Bill of Rights, and then you have the last 3 sections of which are called the Reconstruction Amendments, okay? And those deal with emancipation, citizenship, and right of suffrage. Very important to understand that, all right? As established in the Constitution of the United States. Does that make sense to anybody out there who understand politics? If you understand it, let's move further, right? We know the United Constitution of the United States replaced the Articles of Confederation. It replaced the Articles of Confederation. Very important that we understand that. So got that up there. Now where do I want to go? Let's go here. The 14th Amendment. Let's see that there is no more separation of powers and there is no more republic form of government. Okay? It's no more. If you understand the 14th Amendment. We know we were emancipated by the 13th Amendment and became citizens by the 14th Amendment. Okay? So when you read the 14th Amendment and the sections, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the states where they reside. They're talking about 2 groups of people, those born and those naturalized, okay? Those born and those naturalized. Those born should be subject to just sanguineous, and those naturalized should be based upon just soil, because just because you're born on the soil don't make you a citizen, all right? To make you a citizen, you must have the blood of your parent, okay? Very important. Section 2 deals with the Congress, okay? Section 2 deals with Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3. When they amended the Constitution, the 7 articles of that Constitution, Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, dealing with the separation of powers. When they amended the Constitution, it changed it, the present meaning of the legislation, and now it must fit the description of the amended legislation as derived from the 14th Amendment, as meant in lieu of the representation for who it's supposed to represent, okay? Because we see Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 was based upon those who made up what we call We the People, and that was based upon the Naturalization Act of 1790, okay? Was based upon a color of a skin. The 14th Amendment had nothing to do with that because the 14th Amendment was only put there for the emancipated free slaves, okay? They were emancipated by the 13th Amendment. So when they created the 14th Amendment, which was a change in the legal framework of the government, the entire structure from Article 1 to Article 7 was changed under the 14th Amendment in lieu of Section 1, okay? Life, liberty, property, and due process of law for the citizens who became citizens by way of the 14th Amendment. The founding fathers can then use that citizenship clause because their citizenship clause came by what we call the Naturalization Act of 1790. How we know it? Let's see. Section 2. Representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state, including Indians not taxed. But when the right to vote of any election for the choice of electors for president and vice president of the United States, representatives in Congress, the executive, the judicial officers of the state, or the members of the legislature thereof, is denied to any of the male inhabitants of such state being 21 years of age and a citizen of the United States, or in any way abridged except for participation in rebellion or other crime, the basis for representation therein to be reduced in proportion with the number of such male citizens to bear the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age and in such state. So meaning that in regards to the passing of the 14th Amendment and the representation as apportioned by the representatives pertaining to Section 2, should be based upon the representation for those who are emancipated in lieu of the 14th Amendment, not representatives going all the way back to Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, because under the new amendment of the 14th Amendment, it should have been laid out the separation of powers as established in Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 under the 7 original articles. The 3 original articles. Under the 14th Amendment, we see the executive, legislative, and judicial all packed up in one section. What? Section 2. Okay, so there is no more Republican form of government, and there is no more separation of powers because they're all right here in Section 2 under a new administration of government based upon the amendment to the Constitution. Okay, which changed the Constitution. Okay, if there was separation of powers, then it would have said it right here in Section 2. It does not say that at all. Not at all. Okay, very important for us to understand that. Let's make sure we know what we're talking about. All right. Let's find out who we the people we're talking about. Persons born or naturalized, because the person that we see called we the people in the preamble and the Declaration of Independence under the United States Constitution, superseding the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, that was based upon the Naturalization Act of 1790. Okay, identifying the class of citizenship based upon those who are members of that slave society, because it wasn't a free society, you passed the 14th Amendment. So there had to be a new census taken, and a new census that was taken was based upon those who were strictly African or Black or Negroes, whatever name you chose. Nonetheless, they were still considered free persons. Okay? All right? Free persons. So let's look at the difference between those who are born just sanguineous and those who are born by just soil. Those who are born by just soil as a naturalized citizen, because when we go back to the Naturalization Act of 1790, it clearly shows you intent of that act and who it applies to. So let's look at it. Naturalization Act. I put it out. Naturalization Act of 1790 was an act passed March 26, 1790. Was a law of the United States, Congress that set the first uniform rule for granting of United States citizenship by naturalization. Okay, so there's a difference between those born and those naturalized. All right. Once again, there's a difference between those born and those naturalized. And the first enactment of citizenship by way of naturalization came through the Naturalization Act of 1790. Okay. The law limited naturalization to what? Free white persons of good character. Okay. Free white person of good character. This eliminated ambiguity on how to treat newcomers, given that free blacks people have been allowed citizenship at the state level in many states. Hold on. How can this be? The first Naturalization Act enacted by the Founding Fathers to make them citizens, okay? To make them citizens, it said that there were free black people who had been allowed citizenship at the state level in many states, okay? So there must have been a citizenship requirement on the state level versus that on the federal level. And the first enactment on the federal level was the Naturalization Act of 1790, okay? Black people did not qualify that if you're looking at it based upon the color of skin, not including the nationality of these black people, because you're only dealing with the color of skin. What was the nationality of these black people who had this color of skin walking around at this time in the states when they passed the Naturalization Act of 1790? And at this time, black people were supposed to be what? In slavery. How? In reading in the Naturalization Act, the court also associated whiteness with Christianity and thus excluded Muslim immigrants from citizenship until the decision of ex parte Moriez. Okay? Very important. Who are these black people walking around in the states prior to the Naturalization Act of 1790? Okay? Congress modeled the act on the Plantation Act of 1740 of the British Parliament Act by King George II. That was officially titled an act for naturalizing such foreign Protestants and others therein mentioned, which as are settled or still settled in His Majesty's colonies in America, and use its provisions concerning time, oath of allegiance, process of swearing before a judge, etc. So this is the Naturalization Act of 1970, going back to the 14th Amendment. Okay? It wasn't citizens of the Naturalization Act of 1790. That is clear. Okay? It only denotes to free white persons, which were called we the people. We wasn't a part of we the people until the passing of the 14th Amendment. And it wasn't because we went through some type of naturalization process. We were born citizens because we were born on this land. All right? Very important. Versus those who are naturalized citizens. Okay? Because it says all persons born or naturalized in the United States is subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That was a duke. All right? They gave you a choice. Are you going to be a naturalized citizen or a born citizen? Because you're born, it's just sanguineous. If you're naturalized, it's just soil. And just because you're born on the soil does not make you a citizen. If you're born on the soil and you're not have a parent by just sanguineous, by blood, then you do not have a right to life, liberty, or property under the 14th Amendment, Section 1. Why? Because there was no promise of life, liberty, or property, or due process of law under Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. Okay? Or Article 4. That promise was based upon the preamble of the Constitution, but has no legal effect. Okay? It has no legal effect. We must understand what the king is trying to relate to his subjects. Okay? So Section 1 is what it's all about, brothers and sisters. The Founding Fathers wanted the life, the liberties, and the property of the English identified as Black Anglo-Saxon people, okay? Very important. They wanted those rights. What rights were called Englishman because the Englishman was the person identified as black. Because who these people walking around when they enacted the Naturalization Act of 1790? Clearly, they said they were free. Okay? It said that these people were free. Free black people. It didn't say African people. It didn't say white people. White people weren't not even free at this particular time. Why? Because you were not a citizen. You was acting in some type of official capacity, holding a tenure. That's why you passed the Naturalization Act of 1790. An amendment to the Constitution is different from a legislative act. A legislative act is an act of the legislative branch where it becomes null and void when the amendment to the Constitution becomes effective, as we just read. Okay? So once the 14th Amendment was passed, which was an amendment to the Constitution, the legislative act concerning the Naturalization Act concerning those of a free white person became void. Void in law. Why? Because a new class of citizens now, made up of we the people, who are citizens not because of some legislative enactment governing some statute, but by way of the amending of the Constitution. Okay? We must understand that. We don't classify on the Naturalization Act of 1790. Why? Because the 14th Amendment and the intent of the 14th Amendment said we do not. Okay? If you have a hard time believing that, let's go to the case law to qualify it. Ere Amahashan. Summarize the approach which must be followed in deciding whether a particular person applying for citizenship is a white person within the meaning of the statute, Naturalization Act of 1790 we're talking about. When that act was created, black people were walking around in the states, as it said, right? So to establish and deciding where a particular person applying for citizenship is a white person within the meaning of the statute as interpreted by the Supreme Court, it is necessary to determine first the particular group or racial subdivision to which the individual belongs. Okay? We ain't talking about a color of skin, but the racial group that the individual belongs. In practical effects, proof of this fact, conclusive evidence is a matter of what? Genealogy. They can't prove that matter of fact based upon genealogy because they chose how they would choose citizenship based upon the intentions of the statute, which is the Naturalization Act, which is based upon the color of skin. So even if we were free or not, we could not be classified as citizens under the Naturalization Act. But yet there were black people walking around at the time of the Naturalization Act, even though there were black people, slaves at that time. All right, assumed to be black people, but they were not. They were Africans. Okay, black people are not African, and Africans are not black people. We must understand that. Why? Let's go further. An individual who presents an aberration from the color of skin of the group which he is a member, such as light-skinned Chinese or Japanese, both light-skinned, or a dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, does not thereby acquire a different status under the act from a member of his group. So they gave you two classifications, genealogy and color of skin. Okay? And they put Japanese and Chinese into light skin. They put white people into white skin. Okay? But they chose to put dark-skinned people into what they call Anglo-Saxon. And the Anglo-Saxon are the English people. Okay? They are the English people and does not thereby acquire different status under the act from other members of that group. Of course, listen, brothers and sisters, listen. Of course, when an individual applying for citizenship has a skin of a different color than is usual for the members of the group from which he claims to come, a strong burden of proof then rests upon him to show by the usual methods of proving genealogy that he is in fact a member of that group. You can't prove that genealogy based upon color of skin, brothers and sisters. You can't do it. After an individual has been traced into that group, the second question, which the court must answer when he traces to that group, whether you're light-skinned, Chinese or Japanese, or a white person as intended by the Naturalization Act, or a dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon based upon English law, okay, the 14th Amendment, that's English law, because the 14th Amendment must be construed to the common law in light of the history where the common law originated from. That's the English people. But apparently, according to what we're reading here, are dark-skinned Anglo-Saxons. Okay? After the individual has been traced into his group, the second question with the court, not out there on the street, not in some what we call city council meeting, but in the court, after the individual has to trace into his group, the second question which the court must answer is whether the member of the group as a whole are white persons or light-skinned persons as intended and understood in the term of the 1790 when the first enactment of that statute. And deciding the latter question, the test is not how the group in question will be classified by ethnologists, I can't have a hard time saying it, ethnologists, which have made a study of racial origin, but rather what group of people then living in 1790 with the characteristics then existing were intended by Congress to be classified as white persons. Applying these principles, the court finds that petitioner is an Arab and that Arabs are not white persons within the meaning of this act. Nor can Chinese, light-skinned Chinese or Japanese can be considered a citizen within the meaning of that act. Okay, you have to use another act to justify that, and which we're going to talk about in a second. Okay, and they said that the Anglo-Saxon who were dark-skinned has to decide how he's going to associate himself with the meaning and interpretation of the Naturalization Act versus proving your relationship to your true group based upon genealogy or ethnicity. Okay, so you have a choice to make, brothers and sisters. All right, if you're going to decide that you're American citizen based upon genealogy or based upon the color of skin or based upon a legislative enactment called the Naturalization Act of 1790. You don't need that. Why? Because look what the case law says. United States versus Sing Tuk Du or Du. Sing Tuk or Du. Look what it says. Right here. We're talking about American citizen. A citizen by way of the Naturalization Act of 1790 is not an American citizen. Okay? You're not an American citizen because when you say an American citizen, you must do it based upon the genealogy of those who are citizens of what we call America. We know that the founding fathers didn't identify based upon ethnicity or genealogy with their identifying with citizenship. So therefore, they're classified not as born, but naturalized. Okay? They're trying to say because they're naturalized and born, they have a right as citizens. You do not. Just because you're born here does not make you a citizen. Why? Because it says here in this case, must an American citizen seeking to return to his native land be compelled to bring with him 2 witnesses to prove the place of his birth, or else be denied his right to return. And all opportunity of establishing his citizenship in the courts of his country. Question: no such rule is enforced against an American citizen of Anglo-Saxon descent. Did you hear that? If this be, as claimed, a government of laws and not of men. So based upon this statement, this is not a government of laws, nor a government of men, because according to what they're saying that the Anglo-Saxons who were dark-skinned, as we said in Ray Hamad Hassan, are not citizens based upon the Naturalization Act of 1790, because all that had to do with what a color of skin. And if your color of skin was white or light-skinned, you cannot be a citizen. They changed their mind about if you were light-skinned, Chinese or Japanese, and Wan Kim Art. Okay? But that case did not associate citizenship with Arabs. And Arabs are known as Moors, but Moors are not Berbers because Berbers are Anglo-Saxon, which are in fact the English people. Okay? And they don't have to prove, as United States versus Sing Tuk said, that they are in fact American citizens because they are in fact Anglo-Saxons. We know that because we can prove that through our genealogy and not based upon some legislative enactment by Congress, which violates Congress as a result of the intent of Congress when they passed the 14th Amendment. And that had nothing to do with people who became citizens under the Nationalization Act. It had something to do with people who became citizens under the 14th Amendment, and the 14th Amendment must be construed to those dark-skinned Anglo-Saxons based upon their history, which apparently, according to the case file, were American citizens. Okay? They were, in fact, American citizens. Please don't play with your king. How we know that? Because what they said, the Nationalization Act at that time, black people, free black people, not slaves, were walking around in the States, okay, in 1790, okay? In 1790, not Native American Indians, but black people. Well, let's look at the census of 1790. Let's look at it real quick. List of free blacks, heads of the family in 1790. List of free black heads of the family and the census, first Census Act, okay? That's 1790. 1790, the first Census Act. You find this book on Google Books. List of free black heads of family in the first census of the United States in 1790. You hear that? Free black heads of families in the first census of the United States in 1790. Because it just said when you pass the Nationalization Act for y'all based upon the color of skin as free white persons, all right, which had nothing to do with just saying greenness by blood, it said free black heads of families in the first census of the United States in 1790. Okay? Not Native Americans, not Indians, but black heads of the family. Okay? Right there. Let's make sure. Let's get a picture. Right? I bring receipts, y'all. free black heads of family. It didn't say African. It said free black heads of family. And the census of 1790. All right. Not African, but black. So we shouldn't have African names here. All right. We should have black names as the head of family in 1790. Okay. Very important. Let's make this connection. So you can see your name up on here, then you know these names are not slave names. Okay. Because they're at this time making citizens based upon the meaning of the legislative enactment. Okay. Our citizenship comes from an amendment to the Constitution that they created. Okay. And the amendment to the Constitution denotes to our citizenship, not a legislative enactment, because the Naturalization Act of 1790 is a legislative enactment, just like the Naturalization Act of 17, 1870 and as well as 1798. All right, you have the Naturalization Act of 1790, 1798, and 1807, which we'll talk about in a second, all dealing with naturalization. But black people had no naturalization process because they were in fact born here on the soil by way of being of the blood. Okay, it just said that dark-skinned and Anglo-Saxon, so that means that you have the blood of the English, and it just said that they are in fact the American citizens, and they don't need no proof to return to their native land. So that means that our native land is not African. Our native land is right here as the American. All right, we must understand that. They say, "Oh, we got these names." Well, let's look at the name. Are we going to see African names in the 1970 census dealing with heads of the family, or black names? Let's look at it. This was in Connecticut in 1790. Now, my family from Mississippi. We know son is a prefix for Jeffrey. Okay. We know Thomas Jefferson, who was responsible for majority of the mess that we in. Thomas Jefferson. We know the United States Marshal is head of the census. All right, United States Marshal. And Frederick Douglass was a United States Marshal for Abraham Lincoln. Let me pull it up. African Americans in the White House. All right, because this is the mysteries concerning the White House. So we should look at African Americans in the White House. March 1st, 1790, President Washington approved the first Census Act. This act did not directly provide for the enumeration of free black persons, specifying only that all free persons, white or other persons, should be listed, and all Indians who were on that tax should be excluded. A schedule of inquiry provided for the list of names of the heads of families distinguished the number of free white males over the age 16 from those under that age, and list the number of free white male members and other persons. Free blacks fell under the category of other persons. Free black heads of family were named. The number of persons in their families were listed, and where the family lived was reported. Slaves, however, were only enumerated. Censuses were taken in Connecticut, Delaware, Georgia, Kentucky, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Tennessee, Vermont, Virginia. However, when the capital Washington was burnt by the British, the census of Delaware, Georgia, Kentucky, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia were probably destroyed. Did you hear that? Let's look at some of the names, brothers and sisters. Remember, the Naturalization Act of 1790 was with the citizenship, let's say, the intent of Congress. It said that there were free blacks walking around in the states, okay? And it say African, it said free blacks, okay? Let's look at some of these names. Free blacks heads of family in the first century of the United States, 1790. Look at these names. Beaumont, right there. Archbishop. Beaumont, just another name of saying it. I'm going to give you a chance to look at these names. You see, you can see your name up here. First and last name, members of the family. Okay? All these slave names, brothers and sisters, because they said they're free names in the first census. Okay? Or people identified by black based upon the color of skin, but genealogy and ethnicity based upon, and Ray Mahan said they were in fact Anglo-Saxons, which according to United States versus King Dua, so they were in fact the American citizen. Okay, and you're counting them right now as American citizens, way all the way up here in Connecticut. Okay, look, check them out. Abby, Akbar, Allen, Amy, Emerald, Amin, Amun, Amy, Amy, Anderson, Ann, Anthony, Ark, Asher, Orchestra. These are last names. Briston, Brown, Bumpter, Bundell, Burden, Bush, Butler, Cambridge, Cape, Carsey, Carter, Kate, Cato. All Negroes and blacks, brothers and sisters. All Negroes and blacks. Badcock, Bassett, Beaumont, Bursley, Belfast, Benard, Bergen, Black, Blackledge, Lloyd, Bohan, Boston, Bristol, Caesar, Chatsfield. All right, come on, brothers and sisters. Put my name up here. All from Connecticut. Can't go through the whole list though, because it's too many. Clark, Congo, Koza, Kraft, Cube, Cuff, Curtis, Cuter, Danget, Daniel, Gang, Galloway, Gardner, Geff, Gimina, George, Goodluck, Gooner, Gorham, Gratis, Green, Ghana, God. Come on, brothers, sisters. Hamlin, Hanson, Harry. What else? Dick, Demon, Dina, Dominique, Dorsa, Dubois, Hawley, Hickok, Hill, Hubbard, Hull, Easter, Edward, Ellie, Aaron, Isaac, Ishmael. You hear this, brothers and sisters? Free blacks. It's Fashion, Finch, Flora, Frank, Freedom, Freeman. You hear that? Freeman. Jack. Last name. Jacqueline, Jackson, Jacob, James, King James, Jeff. Oh, what we have here? Jeffrey, Jeffer. That's my last name. My last name is Jefferson. Free Black brothers and sisters, heads of the family at the time of the first census, okay, when they didn't identify with genealogy or ethnicity as it's stated in the Ray Hamahasa, which also denotes to genealogy, ethnicity, and not based upon the meaning and interpretation of how they identify with citizenship based upon a color skin, which ain't no white people listed on this list right here in 1790 when they created the list for white people. Okay? Very important. It says Negro or black. Okay? Negro means black, right? It don't mean African. Okay? Why is this so? Let's go back to the Naturalization Act. Naturalization Act. So these are not slave names, brothers and sisters. Free Black people have been allowed citizenship at the state level in many states. Who the hell is these Black people walking around, brothers and sisters? Because we just seen a whole bunch of free names. All right? Free names. I got more references to free people, but I ain't going to have time to pull that up. But we see free Black people, okay? Free Black people. We know black had to do with the color skin, and Ray Hamas said the Anglo-Saxon were dark-skinned versus the Arab who tried to classify not as a dark-skinned, but as a white person, and the meaning of the Naturalization Act of 1790, when they just said that prior to their classification of citizenship, it had to do with Caucasian. There were black people already walking around in the States, all right, identify as black, but that's not who they was. They were Anglo-Saxon, and they were the American citizen, and you've been stripped of that because you don't know your history, okay? Very important for you to understand that. How we know it? Let's look at the Naturalization Act of 1798. Look at it. Not 1790, but 1798. All legislative enactments from the legislation, okay? Amended and ratified, okay? By 2/3. Had nothing to do with amending the Constitution to make us citizens. Very important to understand the difference. The Naturalization Act of 1798 was a law passed by the United States Congress, the House, and the Senate to amend the residency and notice period of previous naturalization acts of 1795. You hear that? It increased the period necessary for aliens to become naturalized citizens in the United States from 5 to 14 years, and the declaration and intention for 3 to 5 years. So this is the naturalization process for all those who were naturalized under the Naturalization Act of 1798 as an alternative to those who were naturalized in the 1795 Act, which clearly as black, dark-skinned Anglo-Saxons, Negroes or black, we can identify because we at that time were slaves. So they had to create the amendment of the 14th Amendment to, in fact, make us a citizen without the need or the aid of a legislative enactment, which is disqualified. Why? Because once they amended the Constitution, the legislative acts that were created under that congressional are now been amended to. We must understand that. Now to the African. The Naturalization Act of 1870. How many of you know about that one? Naturalization Act of 1870. Which one this had to do with? The Naturalization Act of 1870, another legislative enactment, not an amendment to the Constitution, but an enactment of Congress under 30, what parts? Let me rephrase that. The Naturalization Act was an act created by both houses unlawfully because it violated the Constitution amendment. It didn't violate the Constitution prior to the amendment, but after the amendment was passed, that being the 13th to 14th, this Naturalization Act of 1870, as well as 1795, as well as the other one, violates the 14th Amendment. This is why they passed the one in 1870, because 1870 was after the 14th Amendment was passed. The Naturalization Act of 1870 was a United States federal law that created a system control for the naturalization process and penalties for fraudulent practices. It also noted for extending the naturalization process to aliens of African nativity and to persons of African descent, while also maintaining exclusion of the process to Chinese American and other groups. Did you hear that? Okay, so now they created another legislative enactment to now naturalize Africans who are aliens and those who are African descent to fall up under the qualification of naturalization, being naturalized as a citizen of the offspring or of the offshoot of the Naturalization Act of 1795. That had nothing to do with what was lawfully ratified based upon the amendment, which was the 13th or 14th Amendment, which dissolved those ratifications that were created under the legislation that was under the separation of government on Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. Okay? Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. Excluding the last two, we're talking about the legislative branch, they saw fit to now amend the Constitution that was going to affect them as well as the state on the federal and state level by way of ratifying the 13th Amendment, which disrupted the body of politics that was there at that time under Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3, which is note to a separation of power. Means that nobody can check nobody. But once that power came back under the fusion of government versus the separation of government, now the power can be checked because the only way the power can be checked is by the legislation. Okay? It's by the legislation. All right? Very, very, very important for us to understand that. So based upon what Imre Amaha said, okay, let's go right back there again. Imre Amaha Shan. And the intent of the Naturalization Act of 1790, as well as 1795, as well as 1870, as well as what was the other one? 1798. Okay? 1790, 1795, 1798, and 1870 Naturalization Act are notwithstanding to the 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause. Okay? Very important because it did what? What did the amendment do? Let's see again what AI had to say about it. The 14th Amendment did not continue the separation of powers, but rather altered the balance of power between the federal and state government. Then we also have the 14th Amendment, or any amendment in that fact. And a constitutional amendment changes or replaces the existing legal framework. What framework? The Constitution. Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union was the first legal framework. The United States Constitution was the second legal framework, and the 14th Amendment was the third legal framework. All amending anything that was done prior to the passing of the 14th Amendment. If anything that was popping prior to the 14th Amendment, once it passed, it was over with. Okay? It was over with. We must understand what's being said to you today. How I know? Let's go back to it. So as we say, under United States versus 1 Kima R, Imre Amaha Shan. The Naturalization Act of 1790, 1795, 1798, and what was it? 1870. All right. According to what they said in Ray Ahmad, all dealing with naturalization are inapplicable according to the 14th Amendment. Okay? Are inapplicable because the 14th Amendment amended the Constitution. It changed the legal framework. To summarize the approach, which must follow in deciding where a particular person applying for citizenship is a white person, and we know that's the Naturalization Act of 1790, 1795, as well as anybody else that want to be a citizen under the Naturalization Act of 1790, you could not classify. You had to either use the 1798 or the 1870. All right, those were excluded. Black people or niggers were excluded from those naturalization processes. How we know it? The 14th Amendment said so. Let's go back to the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized. Okay? All persons born or naturalized. We know the naturalization process. We know those born process. Those born have taken the true meaning of being born on the land to mean somebody born that's foreign on the land, which is based upon just what we call just soil, not just sanguineous. If you are an heir or a subject by way of blood, then you are not just born on the land, you're born by what we call just sanguineous. And you are the ones that have the right to life, liberty, or property, and it cannot be taken from you without due process of law, nor denied to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. That is the Fifth Amendment. When the founding fathers had it, they used the Fifth Amendment for the taking clause of the property, i.e., you, your liberties, and your life as a person, because you were, in the eyes of the law, dead as a person. Okay? It was not to the 14th Amendment that made you alive again, a living being, okay? Alive and protected by the law. The reason why they don't want to follow the law, because the laws that they've been following is the law of the devil, the law of darkness, okay? When you start popping this at them, this is the law of God, the law of light, which is a frequency that they don't want to turn on. Why? Because it exposes the darkness. You can't run from this, okay? There is no separation of powers in Section 2. Not all. There is no separation of powers in Section 3. It mentions no person should be a senator or representative in Congress or electoral or president and vice president, that's the executive department, or holding office, civil or military, under the state or under any state who have previously to taken an oath as a member of what? Congress. That is a fusion of power. Okay? Parliament. All right? Not the legislative. Not the executive, not the judicial who's talking here. This is Parliament talking. You hear that? The 14th Amendment was an enactment from Congress. This is the legislative branch of the Senate and the House of Representatives calling the shot for the executive and the judicial branch. And if you get out of line, then you're going to be in trouble. Why? Because it said representatives should be apportioned among the several states. If you're not going to follow the representation apportioned by the several states as established by the 14th Amendment, then guess what? It should say you should be reduced to the proportion which the number should reflect the male citizens that should bear to the whole number of male citizens 21 of age who are going to follow the parameters set down by Section 2 in lieu of your tenure as set forth by Section 1. Okay? So there is no separation of power. There is no republic form of government. Why? Because this is a government of the king. Section 2, Section 3 does not talk about Section 1, Section 2, and Section 3 of the original Constitution. Why? Because this is an amendment to the Constitution which changes the Constitution legal framework to fit the description of what the 14th Amendment said. Anything contrary to that is notwithstanding. Okay? I didn't say that. Congress said it in the Fifth Amendment, in the fifth section. Congress has the power to enforce by appropriated legislation the provision of this article. So that's why the judiciary is upset. That's why the executive is upset, because the legislative is now making the call. Okay? Now they're switching up things. How I know it? Let's take a look at it. Let's look at it. The withdrawal of the 14th Amendment by those who make up the legislation. This is the 14th Amendment withdrawal from the representatives of the legislation in New Jersey. All right. And this is what they say. They know that the separation of powers is gone. They know it. They said it in the joint resolution, and this is why they broke away from the Union, a perpetual union under the Articles of Confederation, as well as the United States Constitution. Right. This is a withdrawal of the 14th Amendment from the legislation of New Jersey when it was ratified by the legislation of New Jersey, okay, on July 17th, 1868. Okay, hope that date's right. But nonetheless, it said the object of dismembering the highest representatives assembly in the nation and humiliate a state of the Union, New Jersey we're talking about, faithful at all times to all obligations prior to this amendment and ratification. And the object of said amendment were one, to place new and unheard of powers in the hands of a faction. This is what Abraham Lincoln was talking about to the president about the fascists who were not going to agree with them with the passing of the Emancipation Proclamation. The devil told him, don't worry about that. I got that, okay? I got that, all right? Because what happened? Shortly after the amendment of the 13th Amendment, became the 14th Amendment. It was done by the legislative branch. So the devil got in the house and started turning the house upside down. Isn't that the same thing that Jesus did? Okay? So the fact of the creation of the 14th Amendment, which gave protection of those in lieu of life, liberty, and property, which was the free slave, i.e., either black or Negro, based upon the color of skin, but by identity, they were in fact the English people, and it's not going to be until you understand that you are in fact English to understand that the government that has been prepared for you and designed for you was under the 14th Amendment. And that placed the government that was separate under a separation of power back in the hands of the fusional government that was a fusion of power under what we call a parliamentary act. Why? Because we're reading an act of the legislation by Congress, the House, and the Senate, who in 1868 withdrew the ratifying of the 14th Amendment. So it says here, to place new unheard powers in the hands of a faction that it might absorb to itself all executive, judicial, legislative power necessary to secure for itself immunities for the unconstitutional acts that are already committed and those that have since inflicted on two patient people. Meaning that the legislative who passed its joint resolution to withdraw from the Union based upon the separation of power of the executive, judicial, and legislative branch under Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, and lieu of what we call a republic. And we know a republic is a commonwealth, which resulted from an interregnum for not being the king. We know that that has been overridden by way of the 14th Amendment, with New Jersey members of the legislative opposed. And this is the reason for the reproportionment of representatives of the state according to the number as established according to what we call as established by Article 4, Article 5, and Article 6 of the Constitution by way of Article 7, which is by way of ratification. So it said that they understood that the factions that was going to pass the 14th Amendment intended on absorbing, all right? When you say absorb something, means to take it in, not put it out or separate. It means to absorb to itself all executive, judicial, legislative power. Okay? Now, this ain't the executive department talking. This is not the judicial department talking. This is the legislative branch talking. Why? Because Section 5 says Congress had the power to make the 14th Amendment and the sections active. Not the judiciary, not the legislative, not the judiciary, not the executive branch, but the legislation. This is what we're talking about right now, the legislation, all right? This is the reason why members of the legislation who did not agree with the 14th Amendment, it would only be the Confederates, okay, as a result of the American Civil War. Why? Because they were not Americans. They were not Americans. The only Americans were the ones who rights that they were fighting over, called the rights of the Englishmen, according to Imre Ahmad Hassan, which were Anglo-Saxon, and they were in fact dark-skinned. And we know that. Why? Because based upon what we read in the Naturalization Act, they were trying to be citizens, but yet they were already citizens walking around in the free state, because we know they were under the authority of the crown in 1702. before it was overthrown by the British Crown in 1707. Okay, very, very, very important to understand that. So right here. The said proposed amendment, not yet receiving legislative state of New Jersey having seriously deliberate and considered the present situation of the United States, declare and make known that the basis of all government, i.e., self-government, is the consent of the governed. All constitution or contract between the parties bound thereby. We're talking about the Articles of Federation, Perpetual Union, or the United States Constitution, which should supersede it. Nonetheless, it's a contract between the parties, the people and its representatives. Okay? If you breach that, this is a violation of law because now the people can't protect it based upon life, liberty, and property. We never had that protection. Why? Because of what the this joint resolution denoted to. It didn't want the free slave to have life, liberty, and property. In order to do that and to establish a free society, you must break down the slave society. All right, which they said. The legislature of New Jersey, having seriously deliberately considered the present situation of the United States, to declare and make known that the basis of the government is the consent of the government and all constitution or contract between the parties bound thereby. That until any provision to alter the fundamental law, which is by Article 5, Article 6, and Article 7, to which all states have consented and have been ratified by such number of states as the federal constitution makes it binding upon all, anyone that has assented in that liberty to withdraw that assent. Meaning that until the legislation that was in lieu of an amendment and based upon proposal on ratification have been passed, they were still at liberty to withdraw that assent if it was not in the favor of their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Okay, let's get to it. That said proposed amendment, that being the 14th Amendment, not the Emancipation Proclamation that the devil and Abraham Lincoln was talking about in regards to the mysteries in the White House concerning the hypnosis or the consciousness understanding that all people are under, whether you're at home, whether you're at school, whether you're in law school, whether you're in police academy, whatever it is, you are under the hypnosis of what you're being taught. You can't say, no, I'm going to act under my own characteristics outside of what I'm taught. No, you have to stick to the script. So based upon the said proposed amendment, they had to break script, and they did not want to do that. And they knew that if they did, then it would break down the self-government that was already in place prior to the conversation that Abraham Lincoln had and the devil. So it says the said proposed amendment, not ratified yet, not having yet received the assent of 3/4 of the states, which is necessary to make it valid, Article 5 and Article 7, amendment and ratification, to make it valid. The natural and constitutional right of the state to withdraw its assent is undeniable. Why? With these impressions and with a solemn appeal to the searchers of all hearts for the rectitude of our intentions and under the conviction that the origin and object of the said proposed amendment, you hear that? They know more than they tell you. It said of our intention and under the conviction that the origin and object of the said proposed amendment were unseemly and unjust, and that the necessary result of its adoption must be the disturbance of the harmony, and if not, the destruction of our system of self-government. What was their system of self-government? Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3, Article 4. That would change based upon Article 5, Article 6, and Article 7. It did change because the 13th Amendment, the 10 Bill of Rights, and those rights were there based upon the Reconstruction Amendments, Article 13, Amendment 13, Amendment 14, Amendment 15. All the other amendments we do not need. Okay? Very important for us to understand that. Okay? Very important. Why? Let's go back to the devil in closing. See what the devil has to say about it. Going back to the conversation, the devil and Abraham Africanus. Looking for this. We don't need the Nazis Act of 1790, 1795, 1798, nor do we need the one of 1870 to substantiate our right as citizens, okay, or subjects. No need it. The 14th Amendment did it in its sections. This is the ending of the conversation between devil and Abram Africanus before he goes in with the initiation of the contract between the devil and Brahm for the passing of the Emancipation Proclamation before the devil vanishes in thin air. It says here, Brahm said the devil with a curse, and dropping prosody, relapsing into verse. It little becomes either you and I to pause at act of treachery, since in the end, if there be shame, we both of us have often been to blame. Your treason but extends to states, mine is to a higher cause relates. Your grasp at power, I did the same. The treason differs, but not in name. The devil vanished as he spoke, while clouds of ashes and of smoke flew up the chimney in delight as if to aid his sudden flight. Brahm rubbed his eyes and looked to see the devil in reality. Could he have dreamed or was it true? The old brass andorin met his view, and then the heart burned dim and low, the fire which was flickering now. No, a strange dual feeling in his head warned him twins times to go to bed. With tottering steps, he sought his rest, where soon he snored, as may be guessed. He snored away, and any fellow might do the same who got as mellow. All right, now this is chapter 2. Now we're going to read the last chapter, which is the end. You see, the 14th Amendment shows that there is no more separation of power, nor is there a republic form of government. The end of the act. Chapter 11, a year later. So after the conversation with the devil and after the contract made with the devil and Abraham, the initiation of the contractual agreement in regard to the passage of the Emancipation Proclamation was put into effect. A year later, the end, this is what happened. This is what happened. A year later, the end. How little do the humble know what misery greatness is ere told. I mean, how little do the humble know what misery's greatness is heir to. What heartaches, jealousness, and cares beset their anxious heart with fears. When high resolves have once elated, what pain to see them all frustrated. What hellish passions take their place when failure brings with it disgrace. How stoop their minds beneath the blow to everything that means in low. What shifts they make, what agents use, whatever gives hope, they madly choose. With naught to risk, they spare no cost. To gain positions they have lost. Debase themselves, they seek to find, and kindred baseness in mankind. And feeling self-condemned, the while, would think all others just as vile. 'Twas Eve, 'twas Eve, or so. 'Twas Eve one e- 'Twas Eve of one eventful day, as storytellers always say. The president had for surpassed his greatest efforts in his last. And all the world went home in thought on all the wondrous things he taught. The day has passed, the crowd has gone, and all that has been said or done, where records of the silent past say will his fleeting triumph last. The fierce, the fierce excitement of the day has chased the great man's grief away. But now, when all was calm again, began the torment of his brain. And in his silent chamber there, in his silent chamber there awoke the visions of despair. Awoke visions of despair. No longer from his fishy eyes shut cunning and stony energy, but long and silent and subdued. He yielded to his solemn mood, parts of, awoke the vision of despair. No longer from his fishy eyes should cunning and shown energy, but long and silent and subdued, he yielded to his sullen mood. Long time he sat convulsed and wrought, till the words gave utterance to his thought. Oh, what a wretched thing am I, the veriest fool of destiny. How meanly have I sunk below the dignity of honest woe. How have I lost the high estate and mighty have held among the great, and sunk beneath my own approval, condemn myself to cringe and grovel. I grasped at power, fool the thought. Time mocks the ruin and has wrought. Time was myself. The time has wrought. Uh, the words gave utterance to his thought. Oh, what a wretched thing am I, the very food of destiny. How meanly have I sunk below the dignity of an honest woe. How, uh, how have I lost that high estate I might have held among the great, and sunk beneath my own approval, condemned myself to cringe and grovel. I grasped at power, fool the thought, now mocks the ruins and has wrought. Time was when even foes respected, but now have fallen and neglected. The stake was power for which I cast. 'Twas but 'Twas but its shadow in its past. My friends betrayed, I finally bowed to roll the passions of the crowd. But failing there, I sought again my former standing to regain. All will not answer on my sight. The future rides to a fright, and in the future will I mark a path of devious and as dark. All right, so we can end on that. So with that, as we can see, in lieu of what we just talked about, the 14th Amendment, as we stated in all its sections, have done away with what we call separation of powers, as well as a Republican form of government. Okay? The 14th Amendment has done away with separation of powers and a Republican form of government. Why? Because under Joint Have Resolution number 16, which I closed out on, the Senate has revoked Joint Have Resolution number 4, passed in 1868. It was revoked. It said here, whereas even though, been revoked. There's no separation of powers, and there is no Republican form of government. Let's read it in close. This is not from the executive branch. This is not from the judiciary branch. This is from the legislative branch, which is Congress, the Senate, and the House. Okay? In regards to the withdrawal of the 14th Amendment by the legislative branch, which was composed of what? The Senate and the House. Okay? Very important. Introduced January 24th, 2002. Synopsis. Revoked Joint Resolution Number 4 of 1868, which sought to withdraw New Jersey's ratification of the 14th Amendment and its sections. Okay? A joint resolution revoking Joint Resolution Number 4 of 1868, which sought to withdraw New Jersey's ratification of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Remember, when you amend the Constitution, it changes what? The legal framework. Okay? United States Constitution legal framework prior to the Constitution or the Articles of Confederation of a Perpetual Union was dependent upon the Treaty of Paris, ratified January 14th, 1794. So it says the joint resolution revoking Joint Resolution Number 4 of 1868 was sought to withdraw the Jersey's ratification of the 14th Amendment to New Jersey State Constitution. Whereas the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution granted citizenship to protect the civil liberties of free slaves. What slaves? Those slaves who were walking around as free men in 1790 when you passed the Naturalization Act. Okay? We were free slaves when we were enslaved again because the devil said when we emancipate them, we're not going to make them citizens. Okay? So we're in a tough position. Whereas the 14th Amendment also prohibited states from abridging privileges or immunities of any citizen, depriving any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, or denying any person equal protection of the law. We're not talking about the National Act of 1790, 1795, 1798, or 1870, because all those deal with naturalization. Naturalization is a form of citizenship by being born, but it does not deal with those being born by way of blood, just ingredients. So you must know the difference. Whereas the 14th Amendment also prohibited states from abridging the privileges and immunities of citizens based upon just ingredients of blood and depriving any person of blood of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. If you're not a citizen by blood, then you can deprive them of life, liberty, or property, even without due process of law. Why? Because it does not belong to you. Whereas the rights guaranteed by the 14th Amendment are part of the foundation of what? A free society. Article 1 through 7 was not based upon a free society, nor were the Bill of Rights based upon a free society until you passed the 13th Amendment to emancipate we the people, and then made we the people citizens by the 14th Amendment, which we the people of that other group, a slave society, disagreed with. Okay? We must know the difference. Okay? So whereas the 14th Amendment also prohibits the state from abridging the privileges or immunities of any citizen, depriving any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, or denying any person equal protection of the law. And whereas the rights guaranteed by the 14th Amendment are part of the foundation of a free society. Whereas in 1866, New Jersey legislation acted to ensure the rights by ratifying the 14th Amendment. Not the federal government, but New Jersey's legislation. That means it's the Congress of New Jersey, which is the Senate and the House of Representatives. They passed the 14th Amendment by way of the proposal and ratification. Shortly thereafter, though, New Jersey legislature in 1868 attempted to withdraw its ratification of this amendment by passing Joint Resolution Number 4. And whereas both the federal Secretary of State and Congress refused to recognize New Jersey's attempt to withdraw the ratification of the 14th Amendment, became a part of the United States Constitution July 20th, 1868. And whereas attempting to withdraw New Jersey's ratification of the 14th Amendment is contrary to the state-long tradition of respect for and protection of the civil rights of all persons, and meaning the descendants of those who were free slaves. Not just anybody, When you say persons, we talk about all those who are the free slaves and all those who are descendants of the free slaves who made up that free society called we the people. Whereas even though the attempt to withdraw New Jersey ratification of the 14th Amendment was without effect at the time of the withdrawal in 1868, March 15th and March 24th, nevertheless, a need to rectify this misguided action now is rectified by being resolved by the Congress, the Senate, and General Assembly of the state of New Jersey. It says, one, Joint Resolution number 4 of Joint House Resolution number 1868, which is attempted to withdraw New Jersey's ratification of the 14th Amendment, is hereby revoked. 2, duly authenticated copies of this joint resolution should be transmitted to the Federal Secretary of State, the President, officers of Congress in the United States, and each member of New Jersey's congressional delegation. Not the Executive Department, not the Judicial Department, but the congressional delegation, and this joint resolution to take effect immediately. Under the 14th Amendment, it shows you that there is no more separation of power, but a fusion of government, because we just read what the legislative intent. What is the separation of powers? Let's look at it in closing. In the eyes of the 14th Amendment and its sections, and see if the 14th Amendment and its sections denote to a separation of power or a fusion of government. Let's see. Separation of powers. Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 of the United States Constitution, which superseded the Federation Perpetual Union, has separated the powers that was at one time a fusion of power under the Provincial Council called the Crown in 1702. Okay? So the power of the Crown in 1702 was a fusion of government that had the lawmaking power, adjudicating power, and execution power until they created Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 of the United States Constitution. Okay? And it said the separation of power principle functionally differentiates several types of state power, usually lawmaking power, legislation, the adjudication power, which is the judiciary, and the execution power, which is the executive branch, and requires these operations of government to be conceptually, institutionally, distinguishably, and articulated, thereby maintaining the integrity of each. Okay? That's not in the 14th Amendment. As we see in the 14th Amendment, Section 2 and Section 3, it denotes to a fusion of power. And what is the fusion of power? Let's see. The only problem with that is that the monarch is missing. Fusion of power is a fusion of some parliamentary form of government where different branches of government are intermingled or fused, typically the executive, legislative branches. It is contrast with separation of power found in presidential, semi-presidential, or dualistic parliamentary form of government. You have a presidential, right? So that means that you have a separation of power. If you don't have a president, that means that there's a fusion of government. And that goes under the state's government because states don't have presidents, they have governors, okay? So we must understand the fusion of powers is under a parliamentary form of government. And what's a parliamentary form of government? Let's look at that in close. Parliamentary system or parliamentary democracy is a form of government where the head of government, chief executive, derives democratic legitimacy from the ability to command and support conferences of a majority of the legislators to which they are held accountable. Okay? They are held accountable to the legislative branch. Once again, parliamentary system or parliamentary democracy is a form of government where the head of the government, which either be the president or the governor, derives their democratic legitimacy from the ability to command the support confidence of the majority of the legislature to which they are held accountable. Did you hear that, brothers and sisters? Who are the executive and the executive departments? Who are the judiciary and executive departments accountable to? the legislative department will be the parliamentary department, which at the time of Parliament was under the monarch. That was called New Jersey Provincial Council, which we'll go to in closing. New Jersey Provincial Council in 1702. Okay? Before you had the Articles of Confederation, the Perpetual Union, before you had the United States Constitution, before you had any state's constitution, the only government that was functioning at that particular time was called His Majesty's Council for the province of New Jersey, which was the upper house and New Jersey legislature under colonial rule, until it was replaced by New Jersey Legislative Council under New Jersey's Constitution of 1776. This is why you have Article 1, which says the same thing that Section 1 says under the 14th Amendment. Why? Because New Jersey withdrew the 14th Amendment by way of withdrawal. And we understand that that revoke of that withdrawal of the 14th Amendment back in 1868 was not revoked till 2002. When 2002 revoking of Joint Resolution number 4 was revoked by Governor McGreevey, it restored His Majesty's Council for the province of New Jersey. The only problem is the king ain't there, but Parliament is. Yes, indeed. Parliament is, because His Majesty's Council for the province of New Jersey was the upper house of New Jersey's legislature. That is the Senate, and then you have the lower house, which is called the House of Commons, which is called the House of Representatives, i.e. your representatives, okay? The history of the Congress under the Provincial Council, under the Crown, under a personal power was called the Provincial Council, which was established in 1702 upon the surrender of the property of East Jersey and West Jersey, of the right of government to who? Queen Anne. Anne's government united the two colonies, democracy, as a province of New Jersey, which was a royal colony, established a new system of government. Not the government that was under the Articles of Confederation, not the government that was under the United States government Constitution, but the government that was under the Crown, okay? Under the Crown, do what? A fusion of government. The instruction from Queen Anne to Viscount Cornbury, the first royal governor of New Jersey, outlined a fusion of power system which outlined for overlap of executive, legislative, and judicial authority, and provided for a bicameral two division of legislature consisting of a council and general assembly. So when you read Section 2 of the 14th Amendment, you no longer see separation of power under Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, because Section 2 talks about the fusion of power of the representatives of the legislative branch, the executive officers of the executive branch, and the apex what we call the apex system, which we call the judiciary system, which is what we call the Supreme Court. Okay, so if there was a fusion of power of the executive, legislative, and judicial branch, then it must be either Parliament or the king. Because we know United versus One Kim Art, partnership, not United versus One Kim Art. Chisholm versus Georgia said, king is the corporation, the state singly is the corporation, as well as the states unified as corporation. And it also says that the king creates the corporation, all right? Parliament creates corporation, but usually is of the latter and usually of the former, okay? So with that being said, that takes us right, not just based upon the legislation and not based upon the confirmation by the presidents or the common law, but via the statute, okay? Via the statute. Let's read it and we. Certain tenures holders turn into free and common soakage. The tenures of honest manors, land, tenures, or hereditaments, or any estate of inheritance at the common law, held either by the King of England or any other person or body of politics corporate at any time before July 4th, 1776. So when you declared your independence July 4th, 1776, that was the Declaration of Independence. You declared your independence because of the Revolutionary War, because you wanted the rights of the Englishmen who were Anglo-Saxon, which according to Imre Hassan and United States versus Kingdu or Singdu, they were in fact the true American citizens. Now according to the Naturalization Act of 1790, 1795, and 1798 and 1870, but based upon the 14th Amendment, which was an amendment to the Constitution, which you used to create a legislative enactment to create citizens. Okay, so as we see here, the only person that can declare a person to be a citizen is the one who is paren patriae, and that person will be who? The king. Right? So with that, I think I said everything I need to say. Yes, I did. That I'm going to close. And I hope that you all realize how important it is to 14th Amendment is to your inheritance. Okay? There is no more separation of power. There is no more republic form of government. The demise of the crown has now taken place by way of defining of office. Okay? Defining of office. I'm now holding the tenure as the paren patriae, the father of those who were emancipated by the 13th Amendment and became citizens by the 14th Amendment. The only thing missing is me. Okay? The only thing missing is me. So if you want to honor your forefathers, as we are doing, please support your king. And with that, I greet you and I meet you, as always, in peace.